would sell water to thirsty people.
Hello, Joshua Sideris here. I've noticed that as of late, there's been a lot of articles being posted about greedy water companies pumping bottled water and selling it for profit. Right off the bat, I'm not satisfied with the status quo. I don't want people watching this video thinking that I'm apologetic to these corporations. But I also want to address the headlines. Now, the wording of the headlines always includes that Nestle and these other water bottling companies don't pay a lot to bottle the water, as if they should pay more. You know, what are these articles really complaining about? Are they really complaining about the price gouging? Are they really complaining about the high prices? Or are they complaining that, you know, they're charging a lot but not paying a lot? What they're really complaining about is profits, as if profits were the problem here. Well, imagine if these companies were allowed to pump the water for free, but they sold the water for 5 cents per bottle. And because they were producing at such large volumes, sales skyrocketed. Now, they might not be making as much money as they're making now with their monopolistic prices, but imagine if they were able to still turn a large profit. They're not paying anything for this water, but they're making all this money in return. That's not fair. But then the prices that they're charging are really low. So, you know, you're getting the water for 5 cents a bottle. Now, if the water was 5 cents a bottle, I would buy bottled water. You know, it's a nice product to have in your fridge. If the water shuts down in my apartment, the water sometimes shuts down. It's good to have cold water. It's convenient. I don't have to worry about dust getting in there because it's sealed. I can take it if I'm on the go. I can grab a bottle of water and go. 5 cents is the price I would pay for water easily. But, you know, would people still be complaining if the water costed 5 cents a bottle if the companies were turning a profit? Maybe they would. Maybe these, you know, the mainstream media would be complaining even if water was 5 cents a bottle. Oh, Nestle is making $1 billion a year and they're not paying anything, you know. And imagine a flip side of things. Imagine if they got charged the equivalent of $10 per bottle that they create. So you want to create a 500 milliliter bottle of water, that's $10. And then Nestle turned around and sold it for 10% profit margins. So they're selling the water for $11. So they're only making $1 per bottle. That's only 10% profit margins. Now, I think right now the profit margins are like 1,000%. But if the profit was 10%, oh, that's better, right? Because now they have, you know, you're taking the profit out of it. Except now they're getting charged a lot, and now you're getting charged a lot as the consumer. Now, when you buy waters, you're paying $11 a bottle. But what? That's fair now? That's better than paying 5 cents a bottle because now the profit's been taken out of it. So, complaining about these profits is just stupid. Yeah, that's what the media is complaining about, the wrong thing. Who cares if Nestle is making money off of selling water? What matters is that they're delivering a product that people are willing to buy at a price that people are willing to pay. You know, imagine a person buying water from a vending machine. So I go up to a vending machine and I have $2 and the price of water is $2 and I put that money in and I buy water. What just happened there, right? To me, I could have kept that $2 and walked away. But I decided at that moment that that water was worth more than the $2 to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put that $2 in the vending machine. I wouldn't have bought the water. So if you banned that trade from happening, if you said, no, you're not allowed to sell water to people who are willing to buy it, you know, and Nestle decided to not put a vending machine in the hallway and I didn't get that water. Yeah, Nestle loses a little bit of value, right? So they don't get my $2. They don't get to make that sale. But I also lose value. I would have bought that water. I want the water. I want to pay $2 for the water, right? I don't think that that's a good price for water, but if I was willing to buy it, then the fact that I don't have the water that I would have been willing to buy is bad for me. It actually puts me in a disadvantageous position. And suppose that I was really thirsty. Let's say I was at work and now I'm parched, I'm thirsty, and there's nothing to drink, and there's no vending machine because I'm not allowed to buy that water. You know, I might perform worse at my job. That might cost me money in the end. I might lose my job. So you should let people buy the water if they want to buy it. Now, like I said, I'm not a big fan of the high prices. I don't personally buy into that. But, you know, the fact that we're complaining about profits is completely ludicrous. We're complaining about the wrong thing. And I think that the mentality that people have of that, you know, we should maybe charge Nestle more to pump that water. That's a very dangerous mindset, and that can actually lead to even more price gouging and higher prices. Let me tell you about a trip I took to Israel in 2014. Now, here's a picture I took of a vending machine, and in the vending machine there's bottled water, and they're selling it for, I guess, I don't know if you can say cents, but it's the unit of currency is shekels, so I guess you would say 80 centishekels. Now, the current exchange rate for between shekels and US dollars prices that at about 23 US cents. I found this somewhat surprising because Israel is basically a desert. There's very little fresh water and it almost never rains. And as far as I know, most of their water has to be desalinated. It comes from the sea and they have to remove the salts, which takes a lot of energy and it costs a lot of money. On the other hand, I live in Canada, and I've read different statistics on this. I've read some places that suggest that we have 20% of all of the world's fresh water. I think I read a different statistic that Ontario has 1/3 of the world's available drinking water. Now, if I were to go to a Canadian vending machine, I would be surprised to ever find a price below $1 Canadian, but most vending machines are even more expensive than that. You get $1.50, $2, and I'm not talking about the high-end water. If you go into a convenience store, yeah, they'll have $5 waters. I'm not going to talk about the expensive, heavily advertised waters. But if you just look at, just a typical 500 milliliter bottle of water, you'll get prices around the range of $1.50 or $2. So something about this doesn't really make sense. The water in Israel seems to be cheaper than the water in Canada. Now, I should say that you should just take this with a grain of salt. Perhaps that one vending machine that I found in Israel was an outlier. It could have been a subsidized vending machine. This was at the University of Haifa, so I'm not really sure if this is the regular price of water in Israel. I only stayed for about 3 weeks, so I didn't really get a good sense for things. But maybe people can clear that up in the comments. But I wanted to look a little deeper and compare the price of tap water in Israel compared with tap water in Canada. So I did a bit of Googling and I found that the price of water in Toronto, where I live, is about $3.62 per cubic meter. That's about $2.93 in US dollars. Now, mind you that Toronto is on the coast of one of the largest bodies of naturally occurring fresh water in the entire world, Lake Ontario. So when I did a Google search to find out what the price of water was in Tel Aviv, I found this article, and this is nothing official, but I wanted to share it because I thought it was an interesting coincidence. The first result I found was actually an article where someone is complaining about the high prices of water in Israel because it's 9 shekels and 20 centishekels per cubic meter. Now that works out to about 261 USD. Now there are two things here that I find remarkable. The first is that it's more expensive to buy tap water in Toronto than it is in Israel. There's absolutely no logic for that. And the second thing is that the prices are very similar. Let me explain what I mean by that. When you are setting the price of a commodity that you're trying to sell, you have to consider supply and demand. Now, Israel has a very small supply of fresh water, and in Canada, we have a very large supply of fresh water. People have to buy your water. There's no competition, and they need a certain amount of water to drink each day, or to use in their cooking, or to bathe with. So that should drive down prices in Canada and drive up prices in Israel. Now, when considering the price of tap water between Toronto and Tel Aviv, it appears to me that supply of water is not even a determining factor when it comes to the price of tap water. Now, it would perhaps take a study to prove this claim, and this is a study that will never get done because it will never get funding, but it appears to me that governments are charging people monopolistic prices, and there's no incentive to bring prices down. In other words, they're capitalizing on the laws that they created that prevent other people from pumping water in order to sell the water at whatever people are willing to pay instead of delivering the most water to the most people for the lowest price. Now, getting back to bottled water, right? I recently watched a post in The Atlantic where they had an actual economist come in and talk about why the price of bottled water was so high So yeah, he gave some good points. He was talking about how the price of the inputs to bottled water might be more than you think. Like you have to pay for shipping, you have to pay for the plastic for the bottles, you have to pay for the labels, you have to pay for advertising. He didn't say this, but you probably also have to pay a lot for lobbyists to lobby the city to be allowed to pump water, and who knows, bribes. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the bottom line was that this is just the price that people are willing to pay. Now, I hate to argue with an authority on this, but I actually disagree with that. I don't think that that's the reason that bottled water is expensive. I think that that's a side effect. It's like I said, companies can only charge you what you're willing to pay in an uncompetitive market. So I think the real question to ask is why isn't the market competitive, right? I mean, consider the market for paper. I'm willing to pay a lot for paper, right? If you're a student, you'd be willing to pay a ton of money for paper, right? You'd pay $1 per sheet of paper if you had no choice, because if you don't buy the paper, you're going to fail your courses. So what are you going to do? You're just going to use less paper. You're going to write smaller. You're going to be more efficient. But companies could get away with charging you $1 per sheet of paper if they wanted to, if it was a non-competitive market, and you'd be paying that because that's what you're willing to pay for paper. But the reason that companies can't do that is because it's competitive. If they try to charge you $1 per sheet of paper, another company will come in and sell it for 90 cents. And another company will come in and sell it for 80 cents. And eventually it'll get down to whatever the standard price per sheet of paper is. And then people will be selling reams of paper for $1 because it's just cheap to make paper, and it's easy to get started. It's easy to sell paper. So the prices get pushed down. So I don't accept that the reason that bottled water is expensive is because that's the price people are willing to pay. The reason that it's expensive is because it's a non-competitive market, because these corporations have monopolies that are basically hand-picked by government. So what's the solution? I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for saying this, but I think that we should just let anyone pump and bottle water, right? Just let them do it. If you want to set up a pumping station, you're allowed to set up a pumping station. If you want to set up a bottling station, bottle as much water as you want. Well, I know that people probably think that if you had that, people would just pump all the water, and then there'd be no water left, and that would destroy the environment. But I don't think that that's the case. I mean, if you let people produce paper, they don't chop down all the trees, right? They plant new trees. You can also produce canned air, but companies don't suck up all the air. Well, what about sand? You can go into the desert and take a jar and grab a bunch of sand that you can come back and sell it, right? The sand has value. You could turn it into glass. You can use it for sandboxes. You can use it for kitty litter, whatever. But we don't see the desert running out of sand because everyone's rushing in to grab as much sand as they can to sell it. By my calculations, we only use about 700 times more water than sand by mass, but there's 17 million times more water than sand on Earth. I'm not saying that people don't try to monopolize on sand. Some corporations will actually pay off the government in order to have exclusive querying rights for sand. But what I'm saying is that people don't hoard the sand. They don't go and mine up all the sand and then just create an artificial shortage in the environment and then sell it for monopolistic prices. I read a report that the price of sand actually only went up from about $450 per ton to $670 per ton between the years of 1910 and 2013. So obviously there's a huge supply of sand. But similar to what's happening with water, there are these environmental groups creating these alarmist articles talking about how sand is rarer than you might think, and we should make these companies pay more for sand and restrict the mining of the sand and the quarrying, as if it's better to have sand sitting on the bottom of the ocean instead of being used for concrete or roads or something productive. Well, if it was rare, then the price would be higher, right? We don't need to artificially make the price higher. If sand ever became rare, the price would go higher on its own because there would be an actual shortage. But it's not higher, so sand isn't rare. And so there's no incentive to over-query. And it's the same with water, right? You're not going to pump all the water. Because first of all, if you let anyone pump water, that creates a very competitive environment when it comes to selling water. So it would be really stupid to try to pump all the water and create a massive water shortage. Price is going to be pushed down to like 10 cents or something. And then what are you going to do? Pump all the water and store it in where? Like a giant water tank that's the size of Lake Ontario? Then you have to pay a ton of money to pump the water, to store the water. You have to pay rent, you have to pay for the land, and then you're not making any profit. So companies that try to do that will just go bankrupt. Not only would this lower the price of bottled water, but it would also lower the price of tap water. Now let's play devil's advocate. Let's say that there was a natural drought. In a drought, companies who pump water are going to be able to pump less water, and so they're going to have to increase their prices. That's okay. You want prices to increase in a drought, so that way people stop using as much water. Well, okay, let's consider another case. Let's say that all of your water is coming from the top of a mountain and a corporation owns the mountain. So they can block off all the streams and they can limit all of the water that goes downstream, and they can sell the water for whatever they want to sell it for. Well, there's two things here. One is that how can they stop all the water from going downstream? I mean, what are they going to do? Again, are they going to store all that water in a giant tank? How are they going to stop the streams and rivers for an entire mountain that produces enough water for an entire city? They're not going to be able to do that. So some of the water is inevitably going to escape, where it can go downstream and possibly be pumped by someone else. And another thing is, suppose that they did that and they jacked up the price of water. In a free market, other people would come in with alternative supplies of water. So let's say that this happened somewhere in California. California is next to the ocean, so what you could get is people building desalination plants and then selling the desalinated water at a competitive price compared to the monopolized mountain price of water. I guess the bottom line here is that water is not as much a natural monopoly as people seem to think. Sure, plumbing can be a natural monopoly, and maybe the government can handle plumbing, but pumping, bottling, filtering, desalination, we should really have options. We should have choices. Trying to monopolize water in a free market is kind of like trying to monopolize sand or air. It really can't be done. I mean, there's water everywhere. But don't expect the free market to come to water anytime soon. The government is making way too much money on this. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Josh Sideris.